Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Vazquez. He has 30 years experience in law enforcement. He currently works for Tampa International Airport Police Department. Welcome to the show, Chief Vazquez. Thank you so much for being here.
You for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I something that stuck out to me when we first talked was that you told me that you never wanted to be in law enforcement and that you fell into it by accident. And I thought that was such an interesting statement. And I was hoping that you could give us a little bit of background and tell us how that happened. How did you fall into this profession by accident?
Sure. Yeah, I never dreamed as a kid to be a police officer. Was never in my plans. When I was a junior in high school, I joined the delayed entry program for the United States Army to become an air traffic controller, and that was my dream to be an air traffic controller. That's all I could see, taste, and feel. And did my time in the Army. Just before I ETS left the Army, I went to the 2 week screening program in Oklahoma City at the FAA Academy, and I passed that. Didn't pass it as high as I wanted to, but I did pass the screening. And then they had a hiring freeze, and so I got out of the Army, needed a job, went to the city of Houston, found a job answering phones in the Houston Police Department. And after about 3 or 4 days, I realized that job was not for me. And I applied to become a dispatcher. And so I got hired on as a police dispatcher. It's kind of like air traffic control. You're kind of controlling things. And so I did that for about, I guess, about 12, 13 months when a couple of police officers came up there, Huffstetter and Storms. They were partners, and they came up, and I always have to preface this by this was 30 years ago, so please don't think I'm a cretin. They asked, how come you're working with all these women? I said, well, I need a job. And they told me that the Houston Police Department was hiring. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, I don't want to be a police officer. I appreciate it, though. And they said, well, here, take this, the application. It's a big, thick application. They handed it to me, and they left, and I threw it away. I didn't want any part of it. Didn't want to be a police officer. I couldn't fathom myself as a police officer. Just wasn't in the cards. And they came back a few weeks later, and they said, you didn't fill it out, did you? I said, no, I'm not really interested. And so I promised them I would. And you go through that big personal history statement, all that stuff. It's a huge application. Fill it out, and you get called for this interview, and you go take that test, and you go to this exam, and next thing you know, they're pinning a badge on you at the Houston Police Academy. And I'm not quite sure how you got there, but it was an incredible ride. I knew from the first day I was out there that I should have done this a long time ago, and here I am. Now, if you'd asked me that I'd never been a police chief, I'd have laughed at you, right? That was never going to happen. But here I am.
I love that story. And, I laugh because I feel like I relate to that a lot. I have a lot of people all the time that ask me, why did I start working in this space, in law enforcement or first responder wellness? And I say the same thing. I'm like, it happened by accident. I totally fell into it. It wasn't something that I ever envisioned doing. And I think that you end up where you're supposed to be. I really believe that. And I think that everything in my life prepared me to be in the space that I'm in now. And it sounds like you had a very similar experience where, and I've never heard anyone say that dispatch and air traffic control are similar, but I can see it. I can see exactly how you're drawing those parallels. And I think everything that you went through in life and in your career prepared you for where you are today.
Yeah, and I think what I learned then, but I didn't realize until later that I learned it, is that the best outcomes don't go to those with the best plans. The
Mm,
best outcomes goes to those who adjust the quickest when the best plans fail, and they'll fail. All plans will fail. It's how you adjust that determines your success.
I really like that. And I think that that is actually so much easier said than done sometimes, to have that fluidity, because I think that to a certain extent, we all want to feel like we're in control of things, and I think when you're a planner, it's that control of like, okay, this is what my life is going to look like, or this is how this is going to go. But to have that ability to adapt and to adjust and to grow with it's almost like that saying, roll with the punches. You kind of have to have that ability to do that. And I think that sometimes that's easier said than done, but I agree with you. I think that in my life, when I've been able to adapt and pivot, that has always had the best outcome for me too.
Yeah, and it's natural for police officers whether they realize it or not. I mean, you may get dispatched to disturbance and it's a robbery. You may get dispatched to a check on welfare and it's something else, and just a routine traffic stop, and it changes like that, right? And how well you adjust to that is going to determine your success on that call and in your career.
How did you learn that over time? Because I do think that to a certain extent it is a learned skill and it comes with experience to be able to do that. I was kind of thinking, back to some of my earlier days in my career. And I think when I was still so new learning things, I was I was so rigid. I was so scared that like if something did go awry or that wasn't planned, I kind of didn't know how to do that. So how did you learn to be able to quickly adapt when things maybe didn't go as planned?
You just did it. Just a matter of survival. And I didn't realize until a lot later in life how plans change. And I think probably when I really had an epiphany was when I was towards the end of my career at the Houston Police Department. Right, I started, like I said, answering phones in the phone room, and now I'm the fourth highest ranking member of the nation's fifth largest police department. And counting my blessings, but they had pension reform, and had I stayed, it would have cost me about 30% of my pension, and I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it, and so my plan fell apart, and so I adjusted. Right, I applied, several different places. I never applied for a chief spot. I applied for deputy chief spot and assistant chief spot until somebody kind of gave me a 5-second mentorship and told me not to do that. And uh, ended up here. When I retired, from Houston, my wife said she wanted to go where there were mountains, and so we came to Florida. And people laugh at that, but there's Space Mountain, Splash Mountain, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. My wife loves Disney. I'm an hour after Disney, so it worked out perfect.
That makes me laugh because I'm actually a big Disney person too. That's really funny. Yeah, I love that you said it was kind of survival. But I also think there was something important in there that maybe, I don't know if you realize this, it's how can we stay level through the adjustments? How can we stay level through all the ups and downs? Because we know life is going to hit us sometimes. We're going to have bumps in the road, and sometimes they're small bumps, and sometimes they're really big bumps. And I think, and maybe it comes with age or development, I don't know, but when I was younger, if something happened that I didn't like, or, like you said, that wasn't maybe in the plan, I was so upset. Like, I remember being so emotional about it. Like, life was over. I was very dramatic about these things. And now maybe it's just that I've been through enough of life that I feel like I almost expect things to not go as planned. And so, like you said, how do you have like a B, C, and D plan already like in the back seat prepared? Because now it's like, okay, well, maybe it's not fun. Sometimes things suck. It's not great. It doesn't make you happy, but how can you stay level through it? And for me, that has been the greatest lesson is being able to pivot without having a complete meltdown and still having feelings and still understanding like maybe it's not the best, and it wasn't what you necessarily wanted in that moment, but I think that that has helped me a lot to be able to make clear decisions moving forward.
I think for me, it's two things. I realize as you get older, the better you get at things, the better you get at things, right? So you kind
Hmm.
of build upon the previous. Uh, but for me, it's kind of a roller coaster ride. So I'm a I run marathons. I used to do Ironmans. I don't do those anymore. It takes too much time. I run ultra marathons, 50 milers, 50 Ks. And one thing I learned during the course of each event is that there are ups and downs, right? Try not to enjoy the peaks because they never last as long as you want them to, and try to ignore the valleys because they're never as long as you think they're going to be.
Yeah.
And so you just keep a level mindset and keep going, you're going to make it through.
Well, I think that's resiliency. How can you stay as level as possible through all the ups and downs? And I agree with you. And I actually had a mentor say the same thing to me early on. Try not to get too high when things are really good and try not to get too low when things are really bad. And they talk about stoicism and like different, trains of thought that say the same thing. Like, how can you just stay level through all of the storms? But to your point of what you said earlier, I was thinking about this in the context of wellness. And I think you can apply this to different areas of life. But I was in the gym. I go to the gym Tuesdays and Fridays to work out with a personal trainer at like 5 in the morning. And today's a Tuesday. So, I've been up since 4 a.m., doing this thing. And I,
Late?
what?
I say you start that late.
Start that late. Oh, shots. Um, but I remember like him having me do something really hard, and in my head, I was throwing a temper tantrum. I was not happy about it, and I was like saying all the things in my head. And I realized that at the end of it, after I accomplished it, after I did it, when you know that you can do hard things, you know you can do more hard
Yeah.
things. And if you never go through hard things, you don't know what you're capable of. You don't know what you can do. You don't know what you can accomplish. You don't know how hard, the things that you can accomplish are because you've never been through it. And so I think that that is also a part of resiliency, and you talked a little bit, and I'd love for you to kind of explain some of the things that you've done for your own wellness. But I know that running is a piece of that. And so, I'm sure like the first time you ran, you didn't know if you could run a mile. And then you run a mile and you're like, well, I know I can do that now. And then it's 2 miles and then it's three, and so you don't know what you're capable of until you do it and you do it with repetition.
Yeah. So what I tell people is you should seek to fail, right? Try to fail. And they look at me like I'm crazy, right? And so I like track and field. All right. One of the most interesting events to me is the high jump in the track and field. Even though I'm a little guy, I can't jump very high, right? But the person who wins is the last one to fail. All right. Everybody jumps a little bit higher, and then you jump till you can't jump anymore, right? And your goal from the beginning of the event was to fail, but be the last one to fail. And
Mm.
so keep that mindset to just, yeah, you may fail, but if you're the last one to fail, you still win.
Interesting. I've never heard that before. I really like that. And I can visualize that. I actually was pretty good at the high jump. I'm tall though. So I was actually pretty good at it, but I can see that be the last one to fail, but seek to fail. I also think that when you fail, even if you're the first person to fail or you're the last person to fail, you learn through failure.
Yeah.
You can take a look and see, okay, what did I do that led me to that? And how can I do better next time? I talk about this a lot too, because I think it's really interesting. Let's look at sports, like professional sports teams. There's only one team at the end that quote unquote wins, right? There's that final game, whether it's the World Series or the Super Bowl or whatever it is, right? There's only one team that walks out happy. Everybody else, even if you were in that final game, if you lost, everyone else, is unhappy. But there's never a sports team that doesn't review tape after and still look at their quote unquote failures throughout the game or their missteps throughout the game and trying to understand how you can do better. And I've heard interviews before about these really elite quarterbacks that won the Super Bowl. Regardless of what you think about the guy, you think about like Tom Brady, right? He's one of the longest running, and he'll talk about this where he's like, I still, even though we won the Super Bowl, I still think about that one interception that I threw, and it haunts me to this day. That's still considered a failure, even though it's small. He didn't have a perfect game, and he's still like, how next time can I avoid that from happening? And I think that that mindset is so important that regardless of how good you do, even if you win the final game and you are the champion of something, track and field, whatever it is, how can you still have that self assessment and understand how you can be better?
I agree completely, but It's also important to look at the other side of the coin, right? Maybe you were the person that lost the Super Bowl, right? It's important to go back and look at all your successes getting there too. And some people
Mm.
fail to do that, fail to look at their successes along the way.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, I like that. So tell me a little bit about, I know that you also oversaw professional development and the psychological department. And, I'd really love to hear your experience in that, some of the things that you saw, some of the things that you guys did, and how important professional development is for wellness and longevity.
Sure, yeah. So my last assignment at the Houston Police Department was assistant chief overseeing the professional development command, and among other divisions, including that was training academy and the psychological service division, which was a doctor and 12 psychologists. And so, how am I going to oversee that? I don't know anything about psychology, right? So I had to learn really quick, and when the doctor in charge talked about a pathology, well, what's a pathology? And so you had to learn. And then, uh, you know, um, you kind of got a different view of yourself from a psychological standpoint, and what affects you and what can you do to make it better. And then you said, well, if it works for me, that should work for other people as well. And so I kind of took an interest in it. And one of the things we did was we moved fitness for duty away from the psychological service division, right? So, if you're an officer and you know that the place you go for help, the same place you go to fitness for duty, you're not going to go, right? Because if you're some professions, the profession is not your identity, but first responders, police officers, firefighters, the profession is who you are.
Mm.
And if they take that from you, because you're crazy, right? That's a huge blow to everything And so we had to separate that. And I think it went a long way to encouraging people to seek assistance. It's like going for checkup, going for checkup.
Yeah.
You know, we started something here just recently with our police department. Is um, We have three counselors, psychologists that we contract with, and they work with police officers and first responders, so they understand, that subculture. And we say, hey, if you visit one for an hour, right, you can do it on Zoom, you can do it in person. Visit them for an hour, and we will give you a day off in the books to use it anytime you want. And if there are follow up visits required, we'll pay for those as well, and we pay for them through forfeiture funds. And so we were surprised at the number of police officers that took advantage of it. Hopefully, it's not just for the day off, but if it gets that conversation started with somebody, we think it's a good thing.
Yeah. What was maybe one thing that you learned through that role about mental health that stuck with you that you didn't know that you could pass on to someone who's listening today?
Yeah, so I'll take you back at a point in my career where we were serving a warrant, and somebody came out with a gun. Um, and the whole warrant was all my idea, right? I set it all up, found the suspect, location, all that, come up with a plan, and then almost got one of my partners killed, right? And it was a huge burden on me, right? And this was 1997, 98, perhaps. I didn't dare say anything to anybody about how traumatizing it was to me. Not that, okay, well, I could have got killed, but I could have got somebody else killed. That was a horrible part of it. And that stuck with me for a long time. And then when I was elected president of the Tampa Bay Chiefs of Police Association, I made mental health my platform, officer wellness, and it all kind of came back to me. Right? And I started thinking, wow, what could we do so somebody can avoid feeling like that, right? And we put several programs in place, and then I was appointed on the governor's task force to prevent first responder suicide, which was a 2-year program with a subset provision. And previous to the task force, a state law was enacted in Florida that you could get workers' comp for a traumatic event at work, and it had to be claimed within 90 days of the event. And we all know that's not how it happens, right? You
Right.
may go to an event and then several years later something else triggers, and all of a sudden you're getting those feelings again. And so we were able to help lobby and change the statute that you can receive assistance, workers' comp, not just 90 days from the event, but 90 days from the date of discovery. So 5 or 6 years down the line, you realize, and so we're able to get in statute, which I think is a benefit to everybody.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that sometimes the hardest things that we go through end up being our biggest opportunity to help other people because we don't want people to have to go through what we went through. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, and I was talking to another chief about this recently about, almost like your kids. You think about your kids and you don't want them to go through adversity, but then you also want them to be able to overcome adversity because you know that adversity is inevitable. There's always going to be hardships, like we talked about. And so you don't want anyone to go through what you went through. But we also want to make sure that if they do go through those things, they have the resources and the tools that they need to be successful. And so, I think that it's amazing that we have a lot of leaders right now who did come from an environment where wellness was not a thing. It was actually
Get
kind of
out,
discouraged, in a lot of ways.
out there, yeah.
Yeah. And now you guys are all in positions where you understand, hey, maybe that wasn't the best way to handle that. And how can we improve the profession moving forward so that the future generation doesn't have to go through the same things? They're still going to go through hard things, but they might not have to go through the same things that you guys went through.
Sure. And we all know that more first responders take their lives every year than are killed in the line of duty. And like I say, we do everything we can to prevent an officer from being killed in line of duty. We give them the best equipment, body armor, training, tourniquets, teach them, self aid, buddy aid. We know the route to the hospital and how to get there the quickest, right? And we do that so we can reduce number of officers killed in line of duty. And we should do everything that we can do to prevent officers from taking their own lives as well, which some people say, and I kind of buy that's a line of duty death sometimes.
I
That
was
you
just
know,
I was just going to ask that same thing because I have had someone, kind of pose that question of, well, is it a line of duty death? Are the things that these officers are going through on the job the reason why they feel like that's their only way out?
and it's tough, right? So the stresses on the job cause somebody to take their own life, and now do you have a funeral with department honors, right? Uh, and if you do that, are you glorifying suicide? So it's a tough line to straddle.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just had someone else say that recently about how you don't have color guard.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point that you bring up. Obviously, I don't know the answer to that. I think that the conversations we're having now are meant to get the minds going of, is there a better way? How can we look at things in a different way? I really think that conversations can save lives, and the more conversation about these challenges, then the more um, um, what word am I thinking of? The more progress we can make in a positive direction moving forward. Yeah. I'm curious to know because, I know that you were overseeing professional development. You're also overseeing the mental health side of things. And when I was kind of preparing for this podcast, my question was kind of chicken or egg, like how much does professional development impact mental wellness and longevity? But then how much does mental health impact your professional development? So my question for you is, which one comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah, I'm not sure one comes before the other, but I can tell you I don't think you can have one without the other.
Mm,
Right? Back when we were going through the academy, I say we, you know, and I was 93, I think 94. Of course, it's different from the 80s and 70s, but it was all about how you keep yourself alive on the job, right? Within the confines of the laws and the statutes and the Constitution, and it was all tactical, right? There was no a mental health aspect to it. There was no, wellness aspect to it. That's being put in a lot of academies now, and that's being put through, a lot of training that wasn't there before. And I think you can't have one without the other. You can't have professional development without wellness. You can't have wellness without professional development. I think and the more that those two are intertwined, I think the better police officer and the better human we're going to have for it.
I agree with that. And I also think that the less stigma there's going to be about mental wellness or just wellness in general. It doesn't have to just be mental wellness, it could be any pillar of wellness.
Mhm.
And, my kind of vision, this is my prediction. I could be wrong, but this is my prediction. I think that one day training, professional training and wellness will just be training. I think that they're going to be kind of intertwined like a professional athlete. We see like all of these professional athletes that have all of it. They have the mental training, they have their rest and reset and recovery. They have their professional, physical training, agility training, all of the things that you guys have to do, firearms, defensive tactics, everything is going to be just training, and this is how we're going to mold the best physical and mental wellness for the job moving forward. I don't think it'll happen overnight. I still think that there's still stigma associated with some of those things, but I kind of predict that in order to kind of break stigma and make things normal, it's going to be all kind of encompassing in one.
Yeah, so interesting you say that. So in Florida, we have what we call high liability training, right? Your high liability, driving, shooting, arrest techniques, defensive tactics, use of force, all that. And we do quarterly training here at our department, high liability training. In this last quarter, one of the segments of our high liability training was to present this wellness program that I just talked about with. And so that was the whole department got it, right? And so presented from not from the chief, right? Who, he's the smartest guy in the room. Okay, yeah, we'll listen to him. But from their peers, it was presented from that standpoint in high liability training.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know a lot of agencies are trying to do something similar where it's like, how can we introduce this as a piece of it where everyone gets it every year? So I'll be interested to see how things, evolve over time. I think it's exciting. One of the things that, you and I talked about was the importance of leadership modeling the way and the importance of mentorship. And so what in your opinion, makes a good leader, and how can leaders not only lead by example when it comes to wellness, but also mentor others to be able to do that as well?
Yeah, I don't think you can extricate mentorship and leadership. I think they're both intertwined. And part of mentorship is helping others to grow, right? That's part of leadership as well. I used to have a sergeant when I was in the army. He says sometimes you got to pat him on the head, sometimes you got to pat him on the butt. That's all leadership, right? Um, and mentorship is especially important to me. And I think sometimes we get caught up in what we think mentorship is, and we think of a formalized mentorship program, a years long relationship, that goes on. But sometimes mentorship can happen like that, and you don't even know it.
Mm.
And and I'll give you an example of that in a minute. But I think the best kind of mentors and the best kind of leaders are the ones that you don't realize the impact they had on your life until years later.
Yeah.
Right? It just, but I think if you think of the mentorship from a rigid kind of clinical process we're going to go through, I don't think that's effective as uh, one that's just kind of give and take.
Yeah.
So I can remember a couple times, right? So where I was mentored like this, I flunked high school. I failed high school, right? I had to make an A on my English final to pass English to pass high school. I was having too much fun. My parents were divorced. I was just having too much fun, and I wasn't buckling down on school. And I had an English teacher who knew I was in the delayed entry program to go to the Army right after high school graduation. I took her English final, was in my science final, and she sent a message to come see her. And I went to go see her. Miss Marion Douglas is her name. I'll never forget her name. And she said, Charlie, you know you didn't make an A in English final. And I said, I kind of figured. I said, no, you barely passed it. Yeah, she said, so that means that you failed English, which means that you failed high school, right? So, the reality of it hit me as a 17-year-old, right? Okay, yeah, this seems pretty serious. She said, what are you going to do, Charlie? And I said, I don't know. She says, I tell you what you're going to do. You're going to sit down and you're going to take this test, you're going to take this book, and you're going to take your English final over. And so she gave me a 100-question open book test. I made 100 on it, passed high school, went to the Army delayed entry program. And as I got older, I realized that if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have made it to where I am today, right? And so, did 8 years in the Army. I was about 6.5 years in the Houston Police Department when I was getting promoted to uh, sergeant. And I found Miss Marion Douglas, and she attended my promotion, and she pinned my badge on.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah,
You're gonna make me cry today.
I don't want to do that. But
Um,
so it's a mentorship that quick, right? Within minutes, So yeah, and it was and I always tell teachers, you don't ever know the effect that you're gonna have on people. You don't have a clue.
yeah. I think that it's a really important reminder for everybody. We all have the ability to look out for each other. We all have the ability to root for each other, and want each other to win. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in our day to day that we forget that. But the pursuit of that is worth it. And sometimes we have to zoom out a little bit, And you told me that story, and I had chills because she didn't realize, I'm sure she didn't realize the impact either.
Mm-hmm.
She like, but she genuinely wanted you to win, and you did. And then you recognize that, and you're able to pay it forward later in a monumental time in your life. And I'm sure that meant everything to
Oh,
her
yeah.
because,
Yeah.
you know, teachers teachers do so much great work that I think is really underappreciated sometimes. And they do it because they genuinely want to mold the future generation. And she did that and was able to pin your badge. I think that that is such a heartwarming story. But um, I think that sometimes we need to look out for each other a little bit more. And I think sometimes we get, and I'm guilty of this, like you get so focused in your own personal development that you forget about uplifting other people in their development as
Right.
well. And it's more competitive and judgmental than it is supportive. And I think there's so much space in this world for everybody to succeed. And especially when you're in such a team environment like you guys are in your profession, it's a team and you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so, how can you uplift the entire team and how can everyone advance in their career and in their lives? And how can you help each other get there? Because sometimes well, I would say sometimes I truly believe that um, you are more successful as a team than as a solo mission or a solo unit. So,
Without a doubt. And I sent something to you, an email screenshot that I keep on my phone that I got several, probably a decade and a half ago. I got this direct message on Facebook that asked, "Hey, are you the from somebody I didn't recognize? Are you the Charlie Vazquez that used to be bike patrol in Kingwood?" And I responded, "Yes, I was." He said, "I just want to thank you for taking time investing in me. Right, I was a wayward kid and I knew I was going wrong, and you took the time to set me straight. Even sometimes it took back pedals, but now I have a successful wife and a successful family and a successful child, and I owe that to you." It's like, wow, right? And so I keep that on my phone. I look at it every now and again when things are going kind of down. I remind officers that I'm not the only one that affected a life like that. We all have. We just don't know it,
mm,
right? And so got to believe that so you can keep doing your job to the best of your ability.
yeah. And I think it goes back to what you said earlier about like, how can we celebrate our wins and our successes? Because sometimes in life, not always, but sometimes in life, it feels like there are fewer successes than there are, stressors and things that are going on. And our brains are actually wired to look for danger. I'm going to say that like in quotes, but to look for bad things, to look for danger. And the more you're focusing on those things, the more you're going to see those things. And so, in order for us to rewire our brains, we have to look for the opposite, right? We have to
Yeah.
look for positive things. We have to look for things to be grateful for. And if all else fails, connect to your why. Like I really truly believe that there has to be something intrinsic inside of you that keeps you going through those storms. And that to me, like having a screenshot like that reminds you of your why and why you do this and the impact that you can have. And it's all worth it. Even if it was just that one person, it's worth it.
And it's even what you say is even worse for police officers. I mean, it's in our DNA to look for what's wrong. That's what we do.
Mm.
I don't stop you on traffic and congratulate you for doing the speed limit, right? I don't stand outside of Walmart and thank you for not shoplifting. I don't come to your house on Friday night, at 11 o'clock and congratulate you for the wonderful marriage you have. I'm there looking for things that are wrong. That's what we do, right? And I had an epiphany one day and said, unless I look for what's right, for all around you, you're going to see everything negative, right? And so you always find something right with everybody. And if you find what's right with them and build upon that, I think both you come out of here.
Yeah. I've shared this a couple times and, there's an episode that I did a while back, and the guest was talking about how he was planning his own suicide. And
Yeah.
he was in such a dark place that he felt like he couldn't identify anything in the world that was good. Everything was dark and gray, and there was a whole long story about how this happened, but essentially, he had met someone and he had asked them like, what do you do that makes you happy? And they're like, I buy myself flowers. Every week I buy myself flowers. And he was like, it's a bunch of hoopla, like flowers, like what? And because of that conversation and because he was in such a dark place, he was like, well, I guess I can try anything at this point to try to like bring some joy and happiness. And so he bought flowers. He said it was like the cheap flowers that are about to go bad or whatever for $2. And like he would sit there with a journal every day and he would artificially create joy and things to be grateful for within this bouquet of flowers. And so he would make himself sit there and say, okay, today I'm grateful for the colors. The colors look really pretty, or I'm really grateful for the smell, or this one is blooming in a really pretty way. And so he forced himself, to create this gratitude within, kind of these confines, of these flowers until he could expand his vision to start seeing it in other ways. And so I thought that that was such a powerful statement and story that even in the darkest times, you can find beauty, you can find good. Sometimes you have to force yourself to see it. You have to have the awareness to force yourself to see it. And the more you see it, the more will come to show.
Well, wherever he's at, I'm glad he's still alive.
Yeah, he's great. It was such a really cool story, and I think wellness comes in all different facets, but how can we continue to have these conversations? How can we continue to support each other and uplift each other? And I think that another really good piece of wellness, I think, is becoming a mentor yourself.
I agree, especially when you see success in other people, and when you see success in others, and then you can't help us. And some of it's self-serving, right? You feel good about yourself when you help others, but
Yeah.
when you see lives changed and for the better, and you had a small part of that, that's always a good feeling.
Yeah, I always pose this question. I had a conversation with, I was doing like a roll call, and we were talking about wellness, and there was a young guy in the back, and he kind of cracked a joke. And I was like, do you like have something, because I was asking questions, and he was like, oh no. Like as soon as I said it, he was like, oh crap, she's calling me out. And he was like, I'm really young and I don't have to worry about that stuff. And the conversation kind of evolved of if you feel really good now, that's great. Like we want to keep you there, which is a really good time for you to be proactive. And regardless of where anyone is in their wellness, if you are the young officer who's just starting out, or if you're someone who's a little bit more seasoned and has been in this career a long time, how can you be proactive with your wellness? And if you're not willing to do it for you, who are you willing to do it for? And so it's this question, if not you, then for who? Because I think a lot of times we will sacrifice our own wellness for others. And it's almost like that chicken or egg type of thing that we talked about before. In order for you to take care of others in the best way possible, you have to first take care of yourself. So if you want to be a mentor for other people, you want to show up for other people, you also have to be in a space where you can do that. And so, if you're not willing to do it for you, who are you willing to do it for?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, you for both, right? You're right. Chicken and egg.
My final question for you is for that younger person who's entering into the career. What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something you wish you would have known or something that's helped you along the way.
Yeah, so I love this question, and I thought about it, and I think what's important is to take a risk.
Mm.
We've always heard it's better safe than sorry, and that's not always true, right? Don't be stupid, but I say if it was better safe than sorry, 135 English Puritans wouldn't have jumped on a 100-foot leaky boat and sailed across the Atlantic Ocean to start the New World. Right? Would have been safer in the harbor for the ship, but that's not what ships are for. And if you look around you, you say, you know what? I think it was worth it, right? If it was better safe than sorry, Michael Collins and Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong wouldn't have strapped on to the top of a 150-foot rocket and blasted off into space, hoping that they'd be able to come back. And if it's better safe than sorry, police officer would never leave the roll call room. Take a risk. Take a risk in your career, right? If you're a leader, be bold in your leadership. Don't settle for the status quo. Don't settle for not making waves. Take a risk. Every um, big success I've had in life has come from taking a risk, not from playing it safe.
I love that. Those are great words of wisdom. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation and I appreciate you coming on with me today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course.